My wife and I were living in an apartment, and my great aunt was looking to sell her home. The house was built in the 1950s and needed some work, and my aunt, well, she didn't feel like taking care of it, so she suggested she take the apartment and we buy the house. It was 2005, and the market was going nuts, so it worked out for everyone. We got a fixer-upper for a fair price, and she got an apartment without the hassle. The house was always full of people. We had friends live with us for a while, then my brother, then we had kids. After moving in, I started sleepwalking, actually opened up the basement door, and fell down a flight of stairs. That sucked. Every once in a while you'd get creeped out or hear a strange sound, but it was nothing really noteworthy and could be explained as someone else making noise. My great aunt passed away a few years ago, and things started getting really strange. My wife, well, she would hear voices. My son, who was 2 or 3 at the time and has 2 older siblings, started waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, crying. The cat would go into his room and stare at the top corner of his wall. The dogs would growl outside the door. All pretty explainable. My wife was getting nervous, but I just laughed it off. We live close to the neighbors. My son's hitting a developmental milestone. Maybe squirrels are getting into the attic. Then things started getting creepy. We were watching my brother's son one day. I hear giggling in my son's room. It's my nephew. I walk in and he is pointing at the corner where the cat who had passed away before my nephew was born used to stare at. Just creepy giggling. My son started saying things like, "I don't want to go to bed. He gets mad." Or, "The shadow went over there." I still laughed it off out loud, but was getting creeped out. That uneasy, someone's here feeling kept hitting harder and harder. Then the 3 a.m. stuff. Super cliche, but hand to God, I had never heard of the witching hour until I started talking to guys at work, and that's how creeped out I was getting. I told people about this craziness. I'd wake up in a cold sweat. No big deal, though falling back to sleep was tough because I felt like someone was watching. Then, for absolutely no reason, at 3:01, my smoke detector starts going off. Fire, fire, fire. Goes off 3 times, then stops. I check the house, nothing. I check the batteries and go back to bed. The next morning, 3:01, fire, fire, fire. Goes off 3 times, then stops. I get up again, nothing. After the 4th night, I am totally spooked. Then, inexplicably, it stops. We ended up moving shortly after. We moved into an 1850s farmhouse. I have never felt safer. No creepy feelings. The kids are sleeping better. I've even stopped sleepwalking. As a side note, the people that bought our house never even moved in. They put the house back on the market, where it sat for almost a year. Talk about creepy. I am typically a skeptic and can usually apply logic to a situation and figure out a plausible explanation. When I bought my house, they had to disclose reports of paranormal activity concerning the house. I thought, yeah, whatever, but entertained it in good humor, even addressing said ghost by name. There is nothing concrete that I can tell you. Nothing hovering in the air, no furniture appearing on the ceiling, nothing that shows as any type of blip on anyone's typical paranormal radar. However, the number of times I have had to rationalize an event or come up with explanations for why or how something happened borders on obsessive. The typical footsteps upstairs, children laughing, before I had children, knocking on walls or doors. Hey, it's an old house, Creaks, groans, hot water pipes pinging, etc. It all happens. Light bulbs smashed on the floor, having removed themselves from the metal base. One plant in particular that would get overturned often, on one occasion ending up halfway across the room. The stereo turned on at random times of the day, almost always to classical music. So frequently that I would always keep one classical CD in a random slot in the CD player just to see if that is the one that gets played. Various lost objects showing up in highly noticeable places. Like, how can you lose your watch in the middle of the completely cleared kitchen table? Yet, half an hour of searching, there it is. But the ones that get me the most are the ones where I am completely stumped. On the same day, every year, is the smell of something burning. It can be detected in only two specific but unrelated parts of the house. You can even define the limits of where you can smell it by walking around. After about 2 hours, it goes away until the next year. The other one is the presence of hot spots in the house. Not by temperature, but when you stand in a certain place, you feel something. This has been witnessed by people aware as well as unaware of the phenomenon itself. And some of the spots have a direction associated with them. When you stand in one, you feel compelled to face a certain way. I watched a police officer get completely freaked as he turned in mid-sentence to stare at the wall, looking it up and down, then took 2 solid steps backwards while looking at the floor, and when he turned around, he was visibly shaken. But hey, no spinning chandeliers or dead girls climbing out of television sets, so I'm good. I lived in a haunted house for 10 years. I had 5 kids while living there. Every one of my kids saw the man in the hat on the wall, and they all saw him between the ages of 2 and 5. My kids turned 6, and they stopped seeing him. Once I heard my son screaming for me in the middle of the night. I went to him. He was 5, and he begged me to make his drawers stop. I said, "Stop what?" And he said, "They keep opening and slamming shut. I can't sleep because it's too noisy." Things got moved all the time, and lost all the time. The spirit did not like babysitters and would torment every one of them. The most violent episode was when I let my 15-year-old brother watch my kids. We got home around 2 a.m. and found my brother sitting on the steps in the hallway between the front door and the kids' bedrooms. He was shaking and crying. He said that when he got the kids in bed, the pounding started. Everywhere, all over the house. At one point, it was so bad, he went outside to see if there were people outside hitting the house. There was no one there. He had gone out the back door to check. When he walked back inside, he saw the reflection of someone in the mirror walking up the steps to the kids' rooms. He went running thinking that someone snuck in when he was outside. He checked everywhere and there was no one in the house. But when he was upstairs, he saw a shadowy figure streak around the corner of the steps. He heard the front door open and shut. He went running down the steps, but the door was closed and locked. He proceeded to spend the next 3 hours chasing this shadow and hearing the doors open and close. He never babysat for us again. No one would. I had lights shatter above our heads, and my children would laugh and talk to people in their rooms. We had neighbors call us at all hours of the night asking if we were okay, because they saw gangs of people in our yard and sneaking around our windows. The cops got so used to getting the same 911 call that they stationed a cop in the back of our house to watch our house between 2 and 3 a.m. There are so many more scary stories and the nightmares I had living there. were deathly scary. We moved, and the people that moved in after us stayed for a month. They said it was too scary. The house has been vacant now for 8 years. My husband and I rented a really old house. We had to fix it up a bit before my son came home from the hospital. He was very premature, in NICU for almost 5 months. We took down the wallpaper and painted, took down the popcorn ceiling, the whole 9 yards. The basement was very unfinished and vandalized by the teenagers that lived there before. Swastikas everywhere. We didn't bother finishing it because we didn't really need the room. I only went down there once out of the year that we lived there. It had creepy feelings, like someone was watching you, pissed off. Sometimes that creepy feeling would come downstairs. I would give it a week or so, thinking it was in my head, and then I would sit in the car with the baby while my husband burned sage to clear it out. He says the feeling while he did so was heavy, very angry, and he could see figures coming at him through the smoke. There were countless experiences there. The two that stick out in my head are as follows. The first, I was showering and the baby was in a little bouncer seat in the doorway. I opened the curtain, and just as I do, the can of air freshener that was sitting on the back of my toilet goes flying towards my baby. If the door wasn't just slightly shut, it would have nailed him. I went full on bat crap crazy. I started yelling, telling them if they're going to mess with anyone, mess with me. He is just a baby. As I'm doing so, the detachable shower head went flying off at me, hit the end of his rope and swings down, shut me right up. And the second, my husband and I were in bed, my son in his room right down the very small hallway, fast asleep. We had a baby monitor because he was on oxygen and therefore on a pulse monitor, so I wanted to be able to hear his alarm go off. So my husband and I were laying in bed together. We usually will talk for a while and then say our good nights and fall asleep. We say our good nights this particular night, and not even 5 minutes later, we both hear, clear as day, a little girl laughing in the baby monitor. My husband jumped out of bed, ready to kick some ass, but I already knew no one was there. I was stunned, literally. Couldn't move until finally I fell asleep. I did not miss that place. I'm not actually sure what to believe since a lot of the paranormal occurrences happened to my dad, but I definitely saw and heard some creepy shit while living in a house in my teens. We would very frequently have a sense of anxiety and foreboding in the house, which on its own isn't paranormal, but certainly made it very uneasy staying there. I read somewhere that radon exposure could cause anxiety, and the house did have a radon problem, so maybe that could have been it. But I also would hear footsteps around the house when I was the only one there, and just constantly felt like someone was watching me. My dad got the worst of it and claimed he could hear sounds coming from the basement at night. His bedroom was right near it, whereas mine was upstairs. So I never heard any of it, but I'm an extremely deep sleeper. Then the traditional slams, bangs, and crashes throughout the house. My dad also claimed he would hear knocking on the cellar door. Sometimes he would hear a woman screaming. Supposedly, every family who had ever lived there experienced something. There are 3 distinct things that stand out. First, the night before we moved out, my dad claims he woke up because he felt a sudden hard tapping on his head. Second, My brother's girlfriend was staying over, and my dad and me were gone. We came back to find that his girlfriend's daughter was terrified because she saw a shadow in the corner of the room. I chalked it up to kids' imagination running wild. And third, one time my dad was practicing with his band in the basement and was expecting me back from my Christmas party. He claims he heard heavy footsteps from upstairs and thought it was me, so he went upstairs to greet me, and nobody was home. I got home about a half hour later. It got to the point where my dad had the house blessed, and the priest claims to have been terrified and refused to go into the house at first. This was around the time I was becoming an atheist, so I didn't really believe in any of that, but I definitely experienced the uneasiness and occasional random noises, but never experienced any of the screaming or knocking my dad claims to have heard. At one point, we had some people from TAPS, associated with but not on the Ghost Hunters show, visit us and do a sweep of the house. We got some of the obvious orb pictures, which both me and my brother thought were dumb as hell, but at one point, being a bit of an edgelord, thinking I had psychic powers, told them to take a picture in one specific spot. The result was an image of what appeared to be a ghostly bust of a person with a demented face. We tried to explain it as a reflection from the washing machine, but it looked too much like a person. My house was abandoned for 2 years before we bought it. When we went for the viewing, there was a bedroom closet that was padlocked shut. Think barn door latch with a lock through it. The realtor said they had no key and we couldn't open it unless we bought it. Well, we ended up buying it, and priority number 1 was opening that door. After a few minutes with a pry bar, we get in to reveal a child's play area. Bright colored walls, glow-in-the-dark stick-on stars and planets cover the ceiling. Checkered tile for the floor, no lights, no air vents, and no windows. My little brother chimes in, "Well, this must be where they kept the kids before they died." Fast forward through 3 months of renovations to when we move in and are living there. The loft area has a daylight sensing motion sensor light, as there was no easy way to install a switch. The light comes on by itself all hours of the day. No matter what way we position the sensor, it randomly trips, and we jokingly shout out, "Will you darn kids quit running in the house?" That's usually the last time it comes on that day. A year into living there, we have turned the creepy closet bedroom into our computer room. We leave for work at the same time each day, but arrive home 2 hours apart. I get a call from a very confused wife one day asking why I had come back home after we had left together. I did not go back home. Upon returning from work, she was greeted by our computer room chair in our kitchen. The chair had to travel through 2 doorways, down a hallway, and a flight of stairs to reach the kitchen, seemingly by itself. We thought it odd, but blamed the dead kids, those heathenistic kids. About 6 months after that, we have our last big doozy of an event for a while. We go to bed one night to a house in perfect order. Upon waking, we find that all of our kitchen knives have been removed from the butcher block. In their place, all of our butter knives. The sharp, dangerous knives have been placed behind the kitchen sink instead. None of us had even moved them. We both were pretty freaked out and spent the whole day away from the house trying to sort it out. We decided we were being unreasonable and went home to forget the ordeal. Ghosts aren't real, and there weren't actually any kids who died there. Talking to the neighbor one day, and he confirms that no kids died in the house. A grown man had. The room with the creepy closet was the room where the previous owner's brother took his own life. When his wife left and they failed to work it out, he couldn't handle life anymore. The previous owner kept living there afterwards, but upon finding out he was foreclosed on, he attempted to take his own life, but his children found him and he lived. Later that year, our family grows. The rooms all get shuffled to make room for baby. That creepy closet room, it gets emptied. The weird things all stopped happening. To this day, 9 years later, that room is only used for storage. My 4-year-old son plays in there occasionally, but even in the daytime with all the light the window lets into the bedroom, he turns every light on. When asked why, he just said, "It makes it less weird to play there." Thank you guys for listening and have a wonderful day. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.